Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. This is Jacob, and this is episode 152. I'm here with my co host, Lily. Lily, how are you doing this morning?
Doing good. Happy to be here.
Cool. Thanks for joining me, and we're welcome to have you. So, this week on the podcast, I did a interview with Dylan. So, Dylan used Kratom for quite a while, almost, I think it was 8 or 9 years or maybe even longer. It was a long time. Mostly exclusively, a powder user pretty much. He got clean last August, so we're recording this this episode's gonna air in June of 2025, so about 10-ish or so months. Good job, Dylan. It's a good interview. We talk about his kratom addiction and recovery and some of his prior addictions. All in all, before we jump into that, though, Lily's got a topic she wanted to chat about for our intro.
Yeah. Thanks, Jacob. So, as many of the blue bottles are what has gotten us here today, and the kava kratom tonic that so many of us fell prey to. And I felt it was an anomaly. Like this one product seemed to be the one that was standing out and tricking people, not very transparent about the ingredients and the amount of ingredients and whatnot. And I'm finding that some different kind of dupes of this product are showing up in the market now. Things that also have kava and kratom, and their branding is this is euphoric and this is calming and energizing at the same time. And so I was dropping into the local little grocery store in my small town. And this town is like population, I don't know, 3,500, something like that. It's pretty small. And I was just buying some chocolate ice cream, literally in and out. It was going to be very fast. And I'm standing at the checkout counter and I am staring directly into this display of a little green bottle, and the branding said something like euphoric at the top. And I'm like, oh no, oh God, what is this? And so I pick up the bottle, I look at the back. Sure enough, it's a kava drink and it had 50 milligrams of kratom in it. And all my alarm bells went off. Oh my gosh, this is a tiny little grocery store. It's not a chain. Whoever came to market this product knows that this grocery store isn't a chain. They're not beholden to anyone or any big company to do their fact checking or looking up ingredients or information. And this poor grocery store got duped. And then all the customers that come in are going to get duped. So it's like this chain effect of tricking people and just not being transparent. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of definitely questionable marketing practices. I don't probably ethically dubious is probably the term. So technically legal, but ethically depends on probably where you side on ethics in marketing and business,
yeah.
which is in general in this capitalistic society, I'd say probably not necessarily unique to the kratom industry, but
Yeah.
definitely prevalent. Yeah, there's all kinds of products too that are popping up now that are plays on words that are similar to like just straight up drugs. I saw in a shop not too long ago products that were blue pills that looked very sneakingly blue oxycodone pills with slang names, not with the same terminology, but similar enough that if you're a former opiate addict and had some experience with those, you would be familiar with what they're trying to do. There's the very original kind of extract, old school popular brand was really a play on kind of the opiate term with
Oh,
the lettering and stuff that they used.
yeah,
It's all designed to play on your conscious and subconscious,
of
similar
course.
to like tobacco, alcohol, or really anything else.
Yeah. I think the issue is that these brands, because it's not regulated by the food and drug industry and it's not technically illegal in all places right now, and it's just
Yep.
in that gray area, I feel like they're exploiting the gray area and putting it in a place that many people are gonna go to. Everyone has to go to the grocery store at some point, and they're gonna see it, but not everyone goes to a vape shop, a weed shop, an alcohol shop. Like, not everyone goes. You go there with the intention of getting something, and I think that at places like grocery stores or even little, like, health food markets or even boutiques, if they're being marketed right there at the counter and you don't know what it is, that's where you get pulled in, just like I did, thinking I was drinking a fun alcohol alternative in my new sobriety and so many others. In this case, I don't know what got into me, but the moment I saw that bottle, I asked if I could speak to the manager. I pulled a Karen, but I was very good about it. I was very respectful, and I just asked the manager some questions. He was probably a guy that was my age or younger, maybe 30s, maybe 20s. I said, "Hey, I saw this product. Do you know what's in it?" And he said, "Yeah, it's kava, something called kratom." And I'm like, "Do you know what those ingredients do? Do you know what they are?" He's, "I did a little research. It seems like it's a little tumultuous online with what's what." And we actually had a really productive conversation. And I told him a few things
Oh,
about
cool.
what kratom actually is and what it can do in the body and how it can be addictive, and pretty much with consistent use for 2 weeks or more, we're all hooked whether we think we are or not. And he was surprised by that, and I did put out the information like, "Hey, we all know what alcohol does. There's a label on every bottle. We all know what weed does. We know that it's on the packaging because this is the gray area and many people have no idea what kratom even is right now. The fact that there isn't a label is going to be the issue." And he said, "Oh, maybe I'll put a 21 and over sign up in front of it." And I'm like, "That would be great." I don't think it should be banned or anything. I just people need to know what they're picking up. There's so many high schoolers in this town. I'm just aghast thinking about all the high schoolers getting this to have a post energy workout thing and then getting their lives ruined. So, it was
Yep.
productive.
That's good.
But just another example of how scary it is and how it's just all over the place and it's right next to the gum and the candy and right there, easy to grab at eye level. Caution to
Yeah.
all.
Caution to all. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably already well aware of the dangers, but yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to continue to see people pick up those products and try them and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think good to raise awareness about that kind of stuff and just be on the lookout, everybody, for new products and don't try them because they're not going to be any better than where you already are or
Deserving.
help you in any way. They're just different ways to get trapped in this whole addiction. But
Yep.
cool. I think we'll leave it there and let everybody get on to the interview that I did with Dylan.
Sounds good.
All right. Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Jacob, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dylan. Dylan, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Jacob. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well also. Thank you for asking and for being willing to join us on the podcast today.
Yeah, of course.
So, Dylan, how would you introduce yourself to someone like me that you just met and to our audience? Things like your age, profession, hobbies, family, that type of thing.
I'm 35 years old from the Midwest. I'm a teacher and also a an artist of various types. I make like, visual art and dabbling with some kind of more like computer generated art on the side too, but those are my main hobbies, I would say. And yeah, I'm married. I got married a couple months ago, so celebrating
Congrats.
that still. Thank you. I'm sure we'll get to that. I think it was a big part of my story of recovery so far in some ways, but yeah, no kids or pets or anything, but me and my spouse living here.
All right.
enjoying life.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it's good to be enjoying life if you can. Outside of music and art, anything else you like to do for fun or hobbies?
Yeah, my partner and I just got into running, and neither of us have been really into like the whole cardio side of fitness. So that's been a journey, but pretty rewarding. So I'd call that a new hobby. I play a lot of video games too. Pretty big gamer, and I like movies, some shows, but not too many.
Not too many. That's cool. That's a good diverse group of hobbies there and probably keeps you pretty busy. So that's good. Now that we get the pleasantries out of the way, we can get into maybe the not so fun stuff, but that's why we're here today. Yeah. When why don't you tell me a little bit about your kratom abstinence state and how long you've been able to be off kratom at this point?
So I didn't write down the exact date of my last dose, but it was the kind of date I've been using in my head has been like August 8th of 2024, a little over 10 months ago now.
Nice.
And I haven't had any relapses on Kratom, thankfully, but it's been hard. And I said in my questionnaire, I've been struggling with like the pause stuff still, even almost a year. Nothing too debilitating, but it's been a journey.
Yeah, I bet. It's always a journey. It's also good to get we tend to have a lot of, not that this is a bad thing, but just the nature of this type of podcast and most recovery podcasts, we get a lot of people in early recovery.
Mm.
Once we get past the 6 month to the years mark, we get fewer and fewer guests. So it's always cool to talk to people that have more than 6 months worth of kratom sobriety under their belt. Because you're right, the evolution. I've been off kratom for more than 2 years now, and the evolution of pause and recovery, it's keeps going, and it's often nonlinear and it's different for everybody. So it's good to get a kind of variety of experiences, I think.
Yeah,
Cool.
for sure.
And you also mentioned the questionnaire for the listeners. If you are interested in being on the podcast, we'll link this in the show notes. But we have a new Google form that folks can fill out, and that gets you into our queue. And then we schedule interviews that way. So if you're interested, we'll share that as well. All right. So let's chat a little bit about your experience with Kratom then. Can you tell us how you first encountered Kratom and how you first came to try it?
Yeah, I first tried Kratom in, again, I don't have exact dates, but it was the fall of 2015, close to 9-year run on Kratom. But I found out about it online. It's always, to my knowledge, been legal in my state, but I never bought it in a gas station in person. I think I saw posts about it on Reddit as like an opioid alternative, and it was touted as being pretty safe and natural. And it was available to order online. So I like placed an order and tried it. And I did have kind of some experience with opioid addiction in my early 20s, and was clean for a few years before trying Kratom, and it lured me right back in because noticed the feeling was pretty spot on. Different, obviously, to pharmaceutical grade opioids or things like that, but a lot of similarities. And I fell into using it the same way I had been previously. But yeah, does that cover the question of how I discovered Kratom?
Yeah, it definitely covers the question. And you also mentioned the previous addiction with pharmaceutical opiates, short-lived. Did you have any other history of addiction or substance abuse issues outside of that?
I've always had a pretty open towards substances, for better or worse. And I wouldn't call myself sober today, like fully. I do use cannabis, and I've cut way back on alcohol. That's been a kind of a multi-year process, but I drink much less now than I did, say, 5, 6 years ago. But I still will drink occasionally, a few times a month. But kratom and like opiates were probably the drug class that I've had like the most dependency or addiction history with. There's just something about them that kind of fills some hole in my brain chemistry that felt like the answer at certain times in my life. And now I see that it definitely is not. But yeah, I've never been like addicted to weed. Not like I don't really.
Yeah. No, I resonate with that a lot. So you started out, as you mentioned, I think you said 2014, 2015, you found Kratom online, you tried it, you felt familiar but slightly different sensation than traditional pharmaceutical opiates. So, how did your story progress from there? What were the first couple of years of usage like?
Yeah, it's an interesting story because I definitely had ups and downs with Kratom. And to go back to the very first time I tried it, I think the really positive effects of that first dose, which I think I just took a teaspoon of powder. I was always a powder user, by the way. I never tried the extracts. But the first time I felt great for maybe an hour and then really nauseous. And I was like, this stuff is nice, but it's so short lived. And maybe I desensitized my body to it and I started taking it more regularly, but it was probably only like once a week at first. And then gradually, as many of the stories I've heard on this podcast, for most people who become addicted to it, it ramps up over time. And then you're doing it every day, then multiple times a day. So it's been almost 10 years at this point. So my memory's hazy on how long it took me, but I would say with 3 or 4 months, I was using it every day, usually in the morning and then in the afternoon and then again at night. And then I was trying different strains to try to have more energy for this activity or to wind down for this other one. But it's such a long and complicated story that I could go on for hours. I feel like just talking about the use of the different years, but it all boils down to that became a daily user within a couple months and yeah, didn't stop until last year. But there were times I would try to wean myself down and never successfully, obviously. I think the most I was off there was a couple days at a time.
When you first tried to wean yourself down, if you go back, or maybe the first one you can remember, was that because you were like, I really got to get off this stuff, it's causing a problem? Or was it more, hey, I've been using this for a while, I don't see really many problems, but I'm just sick of taking it every day? Or was it like a combination of both or something different?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was a little of both. For a long time, I didn't really see the harm in it. And I've always been someone that if a substance I'm taking doesn't immediately show it has negative effects, I'll be totally fine with taking it, which is so stupid in hindsight to let my body get dependent on something. But I didn't really know how physically dependent I was till I would try to stop and have really bad cravings. So it was something where in the back of my mind, I knew it was an unhealthy addiction because I could feel the way it to my lust for life in a lot of ways, but it was gradual. It took time. And for a lot of years there, I almost felt like a superpower. It was like all this extra motivation and energy and positivity that I didn't naturally possess. And I ran myself into the ground with it. But it wasn't until early 2024 that I really started to feel like it had turned on me, which is an expression I've seen on like the Quitting Kratom subreddit and stuff. Like people hit a mark at some point. It could be a few months or a few years, but you reach a point where it stops being beneficial and it's just all taking from you. And I guess it took me almost 8.5 years to like rock bottom. But yeah, early last spring, I was just depressed all the time that I wasn't on Kratom, and I was dosing like maybe 5, 6 times a day, and so it definitely escalated, but not. I never got an extracts, which I know are really tough for a lot of people, especially with the new 7-OHs, and I've heard a lot of your recent episodes are about that.
Yeah, I have not experienced the 7-OH products because I quit before they came out, but I started out using powder, and then, like you, the first year of using that, it was very, I could take it or leave it. I maybe had a little bit of physical dependence towards the end of that first year, but nothing crazy. So I could definitely see, just with my limited experience there, how like years could go by if you were able to stay on powder. It's not really that expensive. If you're ordering online and in bulk, you can get kilos pretty cheap, or at least you could. So I think there's less of a financial impact than someone that's using 20 to 15 to $20 extract shots, very expensive kava kratom extracts or 7-OH. So I could definitely see how years could go by. So you get to 2024, and like you said, you're using 5, 6 times a day. Did your like amounts of like your doses increase?
That's the interesting thing about it, and why I think I lasted as long as I did is I found my dose pretty early on. I would take a little too much at the beginning and just get nauseous, so I would always take the same heaping teaspoon. Like when tried to take more than that, I would get pretty nauseous. So it's self-regulating in that way, and I would always have the same amount per dose, but they just became
Okay.
more frequent, and I would need more throughout the day. And I would never weigh it, so I don't have a number amount of how much powder I was consuming, but just estimates of how much a teaspoon is said to weigh. I was probably getting up near the 20-gram mark, which isn't crazy, but it was such a part of my routine and my life that I was definitely physically and emotionally and mentally addicted to it.
Yeah. No, I totally hear that. There's this, I think, with like addiction and recovery, there's often like this notion that things have to get to a rock bottom moment where something drastically happens in your life that makes you quit. And yeah, that's a very common recovery story, but it's not always the case. So I just make that point to say 20 grams when someone's using 100 grams a day or using multiple extract shots a day or a heavy amount of 7-OH. Yeah, there are big differences in the amount, but the way you feel and the feelings it brings you to and the place it brings you to is usually the same. It's just the what the triggering effect is or the triggering incident is for someone to quit is different for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great. I guess maybe my case is unusual in that I didn't have a dramatic rock bottom like a DUI or something, but I could just feel some existential deep wrongness in how I was going about my life that I narrowed it down to Kratom. And it made me realize that like I knew I needed to quit for years before that, but I would never have I don't know what the word is, the
Drive, the
willpower. Yeah.
willpower, yeah.
To actually stop. And actually, when my partner and I first moved in together, I was like, this is it. This is making a clean start. And this was 6, 7 years ago. And I remember I bought a PS4 with the intention of, I'm going to get back into video games because I hadn't played them in a while. And this is going to be my substitute coping mechanism to get off Kratom. And then it worked for maybe a week. And then I was like, I'm basically broke my addiction. What if I just take it for work or for this social event I don't really want to go to? And then you just fall right back into it. And then from then on, for years, I just had no problem being a daily user because I was, like you said, you're like, can be pretty functional even on even harder opiates or
Yeah,
certainly Kratom. It's a pretty functional drug.
it definitely is. What do you think was different about last August that made you actually be able to stop and to pass that mark despite having, like you said, moments over the years of, "Oh, I wanna quit." What was that driving force, you think?
I've always been someone who like really loves the summer, and I've been blessed in my job that I get most of the summer off. At least for the past few years, I've taken it off because the school I teach at is closed for the summer. And had all these big plans in the spring of 2024, like I'm going to do this and this. I had that free time, I realized like I didn't want to do anything but use Kratom. If I didn't wasn't on Kratom, it wasn't worth doing. And something just hit me that this is not how I want to live. And I think it was the worst year I had for that. Like it gradually built up to where the Kratom swallowed everything in my life. I just resolved to quit. It was more like late July. I did a really rapid taper down from that. I said 5 or 6 doses a day, but realistically, I would just take it every few hours when I felt like the last dose wore off. So it could have been 10 teaspoons of powder a day, honestly. So I tapered down from that to maybe just a couple throughout the day. And then I would feel like the withdrawals setting in, which were very similar to what I felt with other opioid withdrawals in my early 20s. I knew I was I knew I was going to be in withdrawal and it was very uncomfortable, but I tapered down within 2 or 3 weeks to just a teaspoon or half a teaspoon, I think, before bed so I could just sleep for a few hours. And then I cut that out and white knuckled it the rest of the way and haven't taken it since, yeah, early August of last year. I've had some close calls, like walking into the smoke shop, asking about their Kratom products. And then as the
Okay.
person's talking to me, I realized
What
because
do
they
I
were
do?
trying to sell me the new 708 stuff. And thanks to this podcast, I heard a lot about how dangerous that is. And that stopped me. I was just looking for some just simple like powder or something just to I think it was a couple times where I was really stressed about some event I had to go to, and I knew Kratom might give me a boost of like sociability.
Yeah.
And I just instead I didn't take it. Maybe I had a glass of wine or something, which was totally fine, or didn't use anything. And you realize
Yeah.
that it's all a lie, and that you tell yourself the addict brain. So yeah, no relapses thus far, but the pause thing, it comes and goes. I have just cravings sometimes when I'm feeling depressed or anxious, and
Yeah.
I yeah.
I totally relate to that. The pause got me and was a definitely a catalyst for relapsing for sure. So all right, so you did a rapid taper, then you jumped off cold turkey and you've been able to maintain these last 10ish months ever since. That's great. Did you use anything, supplements or anything like that to help with the withdrawal?
I tried a lot of stuff, mostly
Okay.
through Reddit, finding things like, oh, this black seed oil for some reason should help. I
Yeah.
forget what it was, like something about the restless legs, which I did have pretty severely for the first
Okay.
few weeks. So I would try that and magnesium supplements. It's hard to say how much it actually did. It was pretty hellish no matter what I was taking. I would try to use cannabis a little bit here and there, but at the start of the withdrawals, it doesn't really make you feel any better. You feel just as miserable and
Yeah.
just an unescapable cloud of depression and fatigue. The fatigue took so long to feel like was no longer suffering from it. But I've learned to distinguish in my mind like the difference between actual physical tiredness, which the withdrawals totally gave me, and just lack of motivation to get up and do something, which I've realized I can trick my brain now into just doing the thing. I'm a little too prone to being like, if I don't feel inspired to get up and do this, I just won't do it. And
Just
Kratom
won't
was
do it.
always
Yeah.
that easy button of take a scoop of Kratom and you feel motivated. But now
Yeah.
I'm learning to do things without that easy fix. So
Yeah.
that's about it for supplements.
Okay. What were like the first 30 days of your quit like once you were able to get off cold turkey? Like, how did your progression go there?
Thankfully, I still had a couple weeks left of my summer vacation, so I laid on the couch watching movies for pretty much 24/7. I got, as most people report,
Oh,
not sleeping a whole bunch. And, but eventually, like a couple hours of sleep each night. But I did have to go back to work like maybe 2 or 3 weeks out from quitting. I'll call it cold turkey, even though I did do a rapid tape quick, that it still felt kind of cold turkey. Having to go back and be present at my job was definitely a challenge, but I was surprised by how quickly and more like myself I felt without Kratom fogging my mind, which had always been, I would always use it at work. Sad to say, but without it, I felt like I was better and more present and more emotionally engaged. And I noticed it with friends. My partner noticed it when we would be hanging out with our friends that I was actually like engaged with the conversations. And so that was very encouraging, even though the physical side was still rough. A lot of digestive like turmoil, as you probably know,
yeah.
and insomnia. But yeah, the first 30 days were surprisingly, they went by quick. And it was really the 4, 5, 6 months phase where I just got hit by when is this going to end? The post acute withdrawal symptoms. They just felt like they were dragging on so long. and hearing and reading testimonials, people who quit and are say they're back to normal after a month or two. I'm so happy for those people, but to me, it wasn't like that. It was probably because I used it for so long. It's taken till now really to feel any sort of normal.
Okay, yeah, so about 10 months to really get back to normal. So obviously you haven't had any relapses. You mentioned the podcast helping to educate you on some of the other products and to help you avoid trying any despite walking into some shops. Anything else that you do to help with relapse prevention or staying sober, meetings, any sort of recovery work?
I haven't gone to any meetings. Like I said, I read the Quitting Kratom subreddit a lot, and I would go on walks and runs listening to these podcast episodes. And at the beginning, or especially like in the winter when I was 4 or 5 months out, that really helped a ton. But I'm thankful that I'm now like it's becoming less of a ever present thought in my mind, like how many months I've been off Kratom or it's fading to the background in a
That's cool.
positive way. Yeah, it's really just those moments where things get dark. And my sister was very recently diagnosed with ovarian cancer, like
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
3 weeks ago. Thank you. It's been rough, and hearing that news and just the late nights googling her condition and trying to find solutions and feeling really hopeless. Like those have been my biggest triggers so far in the last few months, where I just think like that old substance of that I used to use would make this kind of temporarily go away. But at the same time, I'm thankful that I'm like fully present for that. And I was thankful to be fully present for getting spontaneously married in March.
Oh, wow.
Because we'd been together like the whole duration of like my use basically, and getting off it half a year out, I something just clicked and let's just do this. Let's take it
Yeah, there you
official.
go.
So that was nice, and enjoying married life, even though it's not totally different from cohabitating before then. But all these
Yeah.
just life experiences feel so much more meaningful now, and music sounds infinitely better than it did. I was unable to really appreciate music, and I love music. I've been a musician since I was a teen or even before that, and I lost the will to play it or listen to it even. So there's so many upsides creatively, emotionally, spiritually, that it's been a positive thing. I don't really miss Crate anymore.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, it's good that your life today is turned a corner and that you're like you said, you don't miss it. Sounds like you've built a pretty good life for yourself. Just a question about the post-acute withdrawal symptoms pause. For maybe for the listeners, what have been your main or worst kind of symptoms with pause? Is it mostly the anhedonia, depression, anxiety, other things?
Yeah, all of that for sure. And it's so strange. I wish I could understand more about the brain chemistry, the neurotransmitters that govern all this stuff, because it would really seem to come and go. I've heard of people talk about the pink cloud phase,
Yep.
30 days to a month or two out. And I do remember last fall feeling pretty good, pretty energetic and optimistic. But then for some reason, there would be just weeks at a time where I would have the anhedonia, and nothing felt interesting or pleasurable to do. And I would just really have to focus on activities. And actually, Kratom ruin for me was like taking a substance to feel good instead of going out and doing stuff to feel good like a normal human.
Yeah.
So usually if I do enough activities or things that give me joy or a sense of fulfillment, I can claw myself out of that anhedonia phase. But it creeps back in, and I don't know what it is about the regulation of the dopamine and serotonin, why it seems like these big, like a sine wave of going up for a few weeks and then down and then back up. But they've gotten, I've learned a lot of coping skills that I've realized I should have learned in my 20s and early 30s that I'm just learning now. I heard a good quote about addictions. You don't emotionally mature at all when you're in an active addiction. You stay at the same psychological age. And that's obviously a bit of an oversimplification, but I feel like that was true for me, that I didn't grow in a lot of ways that I'm having to catch up on now without Kratom.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that one. That and if you're using to help deal with something or mask some sort of trauma or pain, like you're just delaying. I guess you could just use forever, but that usually doesn't work. But if other at some point you're gonna have to deal with the problem that you're pushing away, or like you said, learn the coping skills to actually cope with life, which can be challenging at times for sure. All right, maybe a couple more questions and then we can kind of wrap up here. So I'll ask a kind of fun one. So I think you obviously mentioned you're an artist and into music. What's like your favorite concert or live event that you've been to?
It's a tough one. I don't go to too many concerts, and I've been to more in the last year than I probably have in the years prior, probably because I'm hungry for those experiences. But actually, when I got married, we went to Vegas and saw Dead and Company at the Sphere in March for their Sphere run, and that was pretty mind blowing. And I will say, I'm not really super well versed in the Grateful Dead, but it made me a believer. It was pretty mind blowing, and just the jam band thing. I've been out to some local shows around where I live. There's a good band in this area that I've been following for a few years. So I saw their concert last December, and that also was really life affirming, just not needing Kratom to enjoy myself in a crowded, sweaty space and like being fully present with people. So yeah, that was a band called Greet Death. They're pretty awesome, despite the morbid name.
That's cool. Yeah, I went to a concert last wasn't last Friday, the Friday before for a band that I really liked in my 20s that was doing like I'm dating myself a bit, but a 20th anniversary of their first album that they released in like 2005. And yeah, there were some people that were very drunk and on other substances that were nearby. And I just was like, I'm so glad I'm not doing that. And I can actually focus and enjoy this show and remember all of it when I leave. It was just nice to contrast those experiences.
Do you mind me asking what the band was?
Sure, I don't mind. It was a block party.
Oh, nice. I love Block Party, especially that Silent Alarm debut
Yes,
album.
exactly. That's
I didn't
why I
realize it
wanted to
had been
go.
20 years. That's a little crazy.
Yeah, it came out in 2005. They started their US tour in Boston, Massachusetts 2 weeks ago or 2 Fridays
Nice.
ago. It's for the listeners, that would be I think it was May 30th, and we're talking on June 14th for context.
Yeah.
It was a cool show. I'm glad that I got to experience it because I saw them once back in my using and drinking days, and it's a little fuzzy.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. If someone was to come to you and ask you what your top tip is for quitting Kratom, what would you advise them to do?
I guess I would rephrase the one that I was saying I learned in the recent months of just, you have to force yourself to get up and do things, whether it's exercising or cooking yourself something nutritious, engaging with that hobby that you lost touch with in your Kratom years. The more you can actually get your dopamine and your serotonin from like fulfilling activities, I think the faster you recover. And it's another one of those things that's nonlinear. I just one day spent with in my studio working on a painting that I hadn't worked on in months because I was so unmotivated and feeling so much anhedonia. Just like one afternoon, I almost felt normal again. It just gives you such a boost to do something for your soul, really. So just little things can make a big difference, or going for a run and feeling like a human again. Even though it's hard, especially in those early weeks and months of quitting, you got to push yourself a little bit, be in you before you start, because that was my Kratom habit. Take Kratom, feel good and energetic, and then do the thing. You have to flip that around and feel good and energized because you did something, and not the other way around, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. The thing is the motivating factor versus I'm going to take this substance to motivate me to do the thing, which is a bit of a mindset shift at first if you're used to using a substance to help get you going or to make it through the day.
Yeah, and I still drink caffeine almost the same way, which is unfortunate. Like I'm addicted to that still, and it's another reason why I don't want to demonize any substance, even something that can be as dangerous as kratom. We're all using substances and coping mechanisms to get through the day, unless you're totally substance free. But then what's food? That's a substance, and you put it in your body to survive, and it changes your brain chemistry and how you feel depending on what it is.
Yeah, there's so many, at the end of the day, right? It's different chemicals and neurotransmitters and things being released in your brain and drugs, alcohol, food, gambling, sex, hobbies, so many different things can be addictive. And yeah, it's not the substance or the drug or the thing is the thing. It's how you use it, and those behaviors and things is where you get into trouble. But yeah, no, I think that's good though. Focusing on the activity and being present and being in it is important.
Yeah, I used to have this thing I would tell myself, which I now realize is a fallacy, that I'm never bored because I would just be content with some hobby. Even when I was a kid, I would never feel bored. But as an adult, especially my kratom using years, it was mainly because I would just content to sit on the couch feeling a buzz off kratom. And that was the most comfortable, most secure I would feel in the day. So why not? If I had the free time, I would do it as much as I could and feel totally worthless afterwards. But it's so seductive, that feeling, that it's easy to fall into. Uh,
Yeah, it could
I don't know if
definitely trap you.
I don't know if we want to get too deep into this, but I have you done much research into like how it's the plant is commonly used in Southeast Asia where it's indigenous to? Like laborers would use it for working in the fields and stuff like that, but in much smaller
Yeah,
doses.
much smaller doses. I've read that a lot more like fresh leaves, brewed tea
Yeah.
versus taking large amounts or just straight up spoonfuls of powder, and obviously not creating extracted of products. And now with what the 7OH, which is basically crossed from a botanical product and, in my opinion, into a pharmaceutical product, it's very different. But yeah,
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about those like Thai farmers who just munch on a leaf to get them through an afternoon. I'm actually like half Thai. My mom's from Thailand. And when she
oh,
found out I
okay.
was using Kratom, she didn't really know what it was. She immigrated here when she was pretty young to the US. But when she found out it's like opiate related, she was like so adamant that I quit immediately. I basically kept my 8 years of use a secret from her because she's so against it and worries about the health effects of it. But it's interesting how I believe it might still be illegal in Thailand, at least, and some of the other countries like Indonesia and Borneo, but it's used kind of in a traditional medicinal way in, yeah, like you said, a much different form than extracts and kilos of powder that we're just shoveling in our mouths here in the West.
Yeah, yeah, definitely different usage and different kind of culture around it. Dylan, this has been a really great conversation. I think it's going to be really good for the listeners. Good to have someone with some clean time under their belt and usage that was on maybe a little bit of the lower side than what we sometimes hear on the podcast, and also just the this exclusive powder usage. I guess before we wrap up, are there any questions that maybe I you wished I would have asked you that you want to open up to the audience about, or anything you'd like to ask me?
I can't really think of anything right now. I feel like we covered a lot of the most pressing things that have been on my mind about this kratom journey. But
Okay.
yeah, I do want to thank all you guys for all the work you put into this. show. I think it's helping so many people, myself included. I wonder a lot of, and I guess I worry about what Kratom's going to become in a few years, and especially with the 7OHs and stuff like that. If it's, yeah, I guess we'll find out. But I feel like this kind of support community is going to become even more necessary and beneficial.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I kind of worry about where things were going and how big the amount of addiction is gonna grow. We recently had a this is the second time he's been on, but we have a doctor, Dr. Casey Grover. Most recent episode we had him on was episode 148. But the in his practice, seeing more folks with kratom addiction, and then we also talked a little bit about, very briefly, about how he believes it's not a matter of if, it's just when that 7-OH is regulated like another opiate, because that's really what it is at this point.
Yeah, I was definitely one of the pro kratom people a few years ago. I would see the push to ban it or regulate it, and I would be against that because obviously I liked being able to buy it online freely. But and I still don't necessarily think any laws should be scheduled and cause give you jail time if you're possessing it, or all these things I think are pretty negative consequences. But I do think more education and more regulation, like if alcohol is legal if you're over 21, I feel like kratom's not necessarily worse, but it people need to be educated about, like, it needs to be part of the cultural zeitgeist. I almost feel like the same way heroin has is like a taboo, or oxycontin or fentanyl, like kratom has just as much potential for kind of roping you in, even if it's maybe more functional, less lethal.
Yeah, I think people need to know exactly what you said. I would like to see. I'm definitely not for prohibition, and I don't. The podcast isn't in generally either. That's not our stance. But at the same time, I think just letting the industry regulate itself through a lot of the bills that have been passed where there is regulation isn't a good thing, because to your point, like, we need proper education on, there's two things, right? There's addiction, then there's physical dependence. You could take kratom and technically not be addicted, but with something that is going to partially activate your opiate receptors, there is no way to not become dependent on it. If you take it daily for a series of weeks and months, it's impossible to not become dependent on it. Just science, you will. It's anything that activate those receptors repetitively is going to cause, one, people don't know that. Two, they don't know how much to take, where there could be a lethal dose. Like, none of that. There's seizures that some people have, and there's interactions with other drugs. Like, none of that is well known or shared with anybody when they're purchasing this product. And I'd personally like to see more, regulation, probably more akin to a state that has legalized marijuana or medical marijuana or something like that, where there's an educated person that's selling it to you that you could ask questions to, is properly labeled with what you're getting, versus now where it's like you walk in and there's 30 different kratom products, and some have the same, or some are stronger than morphine and others are powder that's a lot less strength. And depending on what you buy, your risk of addiction and dependence is much higher versus the other one, and nobody really knows that.
Yeah, I also feel like kratom almost belongs to a different class of drug than something like weed because it has the opiate effect, but it also has stimulant effect. I feel like I've never been diagnosed ADHD or anything, but if I tried like a friend's Adderall prescription or something, it's like similar to what I would feel much longer duration with Adderall, but to white vein kratom strain. So it can focus you and give you all this motivation and energy, but yeah, the opiate effects and the stimulant effects too, I think, can lead to dependence that's pretty dangerous to fall into. But yeah, I'm glad you've found the right word that I was going for there. But yeah, I'm not for prohibition either, but just education and awareness more.
Yeah. Sure that as usage continues to grow, which it seems like it will, more people will become aware, and there will be some sort of response to that. I think it'll continue to evolve and we'll see what happens. But Dylan, I really want to thank you for your time. I think this is a great discussion and that it'll be very helpful for our listeners. Anything else before we wrap up today?
No, I think we covered it. Thank you so much, Jacob.
All right. Thank you, man. And I wish you a wonderful afternoon and stay in touch.
I will. You too.